You know, it always gets me. How can you take just one ingredient like grapes and get so many different flavors? It's really amazing. And when it comes to that, I don't think there's a better example than American wine.
It's true. And, American wine sometimes gets a bad rap, but it's really so much more than just California Cabernet.
Totally. And so today we're doing a deep dive on this really cool book I found called Vinos dos Estados Unidos.
Whoa, hold on.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
What is that?
So before you run off to find your Portuguese dictionary, I'll let you know we took care of the translating for you.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was like, Vinos, what is happening right now? Haha, exactly. But I think even just seeing that title, you get a sense that this isn't just your run-of-the-mill guide to American wine. It's like having someone from the outside looking in. And in this case, it's a Portuguese perspective, which I think is really cool.
For sure. Just that different perspective, I'm sure, brings a lot of really unexpected insights.
Definitely. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Look through that lens to discover all the things that make American wine so interesting, like the history, geography, the people, and obviously we can't forget about the flavors.
Yeah, the flavors are really where it's at.
Okay, so speaking of history, this book talks about how winemaking in America actually predates the California gold rush.
Yeah, a lot of people are surprised when they find that out. Like way before California was known for its wine, you had all these vineyards popping up on the East Coast during the colonial period.
It's wild. So how did we get from those early attempts at winemaking to the huge variety we see in American wine regions today?
Well, there's this big turning point that the book talks about, the phylloxera plague.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Wasn't that in the late 1800s?
Exactly, late 19th century, and they just wiped out these European vineyards. This tiny little insect caused a chain reaction that was felt all over the world.
Wow, so let's break that down a bit. What did this plague mean for the future of American wine?
So it's actually a really interesting twist. American vines just happen to be naturally resistant to phylloxera.
Oh, wow. So lucky break for American winemakers.
Right. While European vineyards were struggling, American rootstock became essential, basically saved the day because they could graft it and revive the whole industry.
Wow, so this tiny little bug basically reshaped the entire landscape of wine production around the world.
It's crazy, right? It just goes to show you that even with something like wine, history can have a big impact on what we're drinking.
Totally.
But I think it's time we move from history to geography. What do you think?
All right, let's do it. So when I think American wine, my mind goes straight to California.
As it should.
Right. It's got those rolling vineyards, that perfect Mediterranean climate.
Yeah, California's killing it in the wine world. And it's really interesting because Vinos dos Estados Unidos compares California to this other really famous wine region. It basically says Napa Valley is like California's version of Bordeaux.
Whoa, that's a bold statement.
I know, right? And I think it highlights how California's Mediterranean climate is perfect for growing those classic Bordeaux grapes like your Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, warm, dry summers and mild winters.
So California is like channeling its inner Bordeaux. I like it.
Yeah.
But our American wine adventure doesn't end there, does it? What about Oregon and Washington State? They're big names in the wine world, too.
Absolutely. This is where you really see how diverse American terroir can be. Vinos dos Estados Unidos points out that while California may be similar to Bordeaux, Oregon has a cooler, wetter climate, which makes it perfect for Pinot Noir.
Huh, kind of like Burgundy in France.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so cool how each region really finds its own thing based on the grapes they grow. And actually, I've always been curious about Oregon Pinot Noirs. What is it about that cooler climate that makes them so special?
Well, Vinos dos Estados Unidos actually gets kind of technical about it.
Yeah.
It explains how those cooler climates usually mean the grapes end up with thinner skins
Okay.
and higher acidity.
So how does that change what we taste in the glass?
It's all connected. So thinner skins mean you get less tannin,
Uh-huh.
and less tannin gives you those really silky, smooth wines, basically what Oregon Pinot Noirs are known for.
Makes sense.
Plus, that higher acidity I mentioned before adds this nice brightness and a freshness on the palate.
So it really is a totally different drinking experience.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got California's bold Cabernet Sauvignon, Oregon's elegant Pinot Noir. What about Washington State? What does this Portuguese book have to say about their wines?
So they talk about how Washington has this really unique continental climate,
Meaning?
hot days and cool nights.
Oh, right, right.
And when you combine that with their rich volcanic soil, you get these really powerful Cabernet Sauvignon wines.
Interesting. So even though it's the same grape, Cabernet Sauvignon, you can get these totally different flavors depending on where it's grown.
Yeah, and that's what we call terroir.
Terroir.
It's like the idea that everything about where the wine comes from, like the soil, the climate, even the winemaker's traditions,
Mm.
all play a part in making it taste unique.
Terroir. I've heard that word a million times, but I feel like you actually just explained it.
Uh-huh.
So it's like a fingerprint for each wine, right?
Exactly. And that's something our Portuguese author seems very into when they're talking about American wine.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they even have a whole section on the Great Lakes.
Hold on. The Great Lakes, like up north. What do they have to do with any of this?
I know, right? But it's really interesting. The book says that these giant lakes actually help regulate the climate in those areas.
So they act like a buffer.
Yeah. They help stop those extreme temperature swings that can mess with the grapes.
So are you saying the regions near the Great Lakes basically get a more balanced climate? And that means they can grow specific grapes that wouldn't be able to handle those ups and downs in temperature?
Exactly. It's a kind of a small thing, but it shows you how geography and winemaking are totally connected.
That's so interesting. You know what else always gets me about wine?
And with that,
The way people describe it. You know those tasting notes, like hints of berries and spice and
yeah.
leather? Like, how do they get so specific?
Well, let's have a little tasting right now. Why not?
Okay, I like where this is going.
So, Vinos dos Estados Unidos has some really good descriptions. They say that Californian Cabernet Sauvignon has these aromas of blackcurrant jam and cedar with just a touch of vanilla from the oak aging.
I'm already imagining this really rich and bold wine. You know what I mean? It's almost like you can taste the California sunshine in those descriptions.
It's true. And then they compare that to Oregon Pinot Noir, which they say has delicate aromas of red sherry, rose petal, and a little hint of forest floor.
It's incredible how those few words can just take you to that exact spot.
It's like magic.
It really is. Like
Yeah.
you said, rugged forests of Oregon versus sunny California vineyards. And the crazy thing is, both descriptions make me want a glass of wine right now.
Me too.
But we can't forget about Chardonnay. There are so many different styles. Every bottle I try is like a totally new experience.
Chardonnay is the chameleon of the wine world.
That's a good way to put it. So what does Vinos dos Estados Unidos have to say about Chardonnay?
They actually focus on Sonoma Chardonnay.
Okay.
They say it has aromas of ripe pear and citrus with a bit of pineapple and this creamy texture from malolactic fermentation.
Okay, wait, hold on. Creamy texture from Franny. What kind of fermentation?
All right, so that's where it gets a little technical. Malolactic fermentation is something that a lot of Chardonnay producers do. Basically, it takes the malic acid, which all grapes have naturally and tastes kind of tart, and turns it into lactic acid. And that's where you get those soft, buttery notes.
So that's the secret to that creamy richness in some Chardonnays.
Precisely.
It's like science and winemaking all mixed into one.
Exactly, and I really like how Vinos dos Estados Unidos gets into those little technical details.
Me too. It's that perfect mix of being easy to understand, but still giving you a little behind-the-scenes look at the process.
For sure.
But you know, all this talk about different regions and these amazing descriptions really makes you think about how American wine went from basically nothing to a global force.
That's a great point.
Like, we're talking about competing with the best of the best.
Absolutely.
And I think now's the perfect time to talk about the Judgment of Paris. You know, that blind tasting in 1976 that really put Californian wines on the map. I wonder what Vinos dos Estados Unidos has to say about that.
The Judgment of Paris is legendary. For anyone who doesn't know the story, it's a real turning point, you know.
Totally.
Imagine being a Californian winemaker back then,
Oh, man.
going up against those big French wines.
Yeah, with like centuries of history.
I know, right? It's like David and Goliath. Exactly.
So what does the book say about it?
Okay, so they actually quote this French winemaker who tasted the Californian wines, but he didn't know where they were from,
Yeah.
you know, because it was a blind tasting. He's like, no way, this is California.
No way.
I know. Like, even he couldn't believe how good they were. And to top it off, the judges, who were all French wine experts, they gave the top spots to California.
They did. It's amazing. You know, it just goes to show you that American wine can hold its own against the best in the world.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Vinos dos Estados Unidos basically says that it wasn't just a win for California, it was a win for the whole American wine industry.
It changed everything.
It totally did.
So what about now? Are American winemakers still innovating? Or was that it?
Oh, they're just getting started, like sparkling wine.
Oh.
The book talks about how California is producing some truly amazing sparkling wines using the traditional method.
The same way they make champagne.
Yep, the real deal.
Wow, that's impressive. I've heard good things about these American sparkling wines. But how do they do it? I mean, doesn't Champagne need a specific climate or something?
So Vinos dos Estados Unidos talks about how California has all these different microclimates, and some of those areas are actually perfect for growing the kind of grapes you need for sparkling wine, that high acidity.
It's really amazing. So it sounds like American winemakers are always pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely. They're not afraid to experiment.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, what about those East Coast winemakers? What's the book have to say about them?
Okay, so they have a whole chapter dedicated to the East Coast. It's actually my favorite part of the book.
Really? Why is that?
I think because it's such a different story,
Yeah.
like we were talking about California with its perfect climate.
Right, but the East Coast is a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. They have way more challenges.
Mm.
Shorter growing seasons, higher humidity, and the weather is all over the place.
So how do they make wine?
It's not easy. The book talks about how they have to be really creative and resilient. Like they're experimenting with hybrid grapes that can handle the cold and wet weather.
That's smart.
Right. They're also trying out all these new techniques to protect their vines from the elements and stuff.
So they're really dedicated to making it work.
Oh, absolutely. They're super passionate.
I'm starting to think these East Coast winemakers are like the unsung heroes of the American wine world.
Totally. And get this, they're also really into sustainable and organic farming.
That's awesome. More and more people are caring about where their food and drinks come from. It's not just about taste anymore.
Right. And the book even ends on this really interesting question. They ask, given the whole climate change thing and how it's affecting wine regions everywhere, how will American winemakers adapt in the future?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know the answer.
Me neither.
Yeah,
But it really makes you think.
it does. And it reminds you that there's so much more to a bottle of wine than just what's in the glass.
It's true.
Well, this deep dive into Vinos dos Estados Unidos has been amazing. It's really opened my eyes to the incredible variety and just the passion behind American wine.
I'm so glad. Cheers to that.
Yeah.